Welcome to The Strategic Edge, the podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners who want a competitive edge in the market. They want to be seen as the expert in their industry, and they're looking for cutting edge and innovative strategies that work across industries to help them scale their business like a boss. My name is Carden, and I'm your host. Welcome to the show. Hey everyone, I want to welcome you back to another episode of The Strategic Edge. I'm Ann Carden, your host, and today I have Vela-Williamson with me, and she is a PR specialist, public relations specialist. She's award-winning. She has 16 years of experience, and she started her company about 5 years ago, and I know you are going to get so much value out of this because today, everyone in business needs to be seen and heard and rise above the noise. So I know, Melissa, that's one of the things you help them do. So welcome to my show.
Hi, Ann. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be a guest.
You are welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. So I'm basically going to let you introduce yourself and tell everyone about your company and then maybe even how you got started in this.
Sure. So, Melissa Vela-Williamson, I am hyphenated. I was one of those stubborn wives that said, we can be added together, but you can't take away the Vela from my name. But it's been great for branding. I didn't realize how much a part of me it would really become throughout my profession because the likelihood of another Vela marrying a Williamson and hyphenating is kind of low. So once you know me, you know me. So that's great. But as you said, Ann, I own my own firm. It's called MVW Communications, and we really focus on public relations as really the heart of our point of view. Mm-hmm. My background and accreditation and expertise is in PR, and that's because I really believe in that people first and, mindset, as well as looking for the win-win relationships between all types of organizations and, the publics that we all depend on. So my heart's in PR, and that's how I approach most of my communication challenges. But as you know, Ann, you can't really do one part of communication well without it being complementary across all channels.
Sure. For
consistency, being authentic, right, and reliable. And because I am a PR pro, we really look for that integrity and consistency in what we do and the actions that our organizations take and, then how we message about them. So 16 years in the business. I've worked in all types of areas, including my very first job was a small Hispanic boutique agency, which meant that we would kind of partner up with more what they call the industry general market agencies, which is pretty much English speaking channels. So for the Hispanic market agencies, whether you're doing advertising, PR, or marketing, we focus on the Hispanic customer, or depending on where they are in the U.S., maybe a Latina customer, and what their cultural preferences are, what music and language they prefer to speak in, be spoken with, and would tailor all of our approaches communication-wise with them in mind as our core customer. Well, maybe the general market agencies would, kind of look at the rest of the population or, more traditional demographics, right? Mm-hmm. So started there, and in San Antonio, we are a majority Hispanic city. So it's something that I'm familiar with as a person, but I also studied a lot in my undergrad and master's degree. So Hispanic boutique agency, number one. And then I went on and worked in-house at a nonprofit. A lot of people know Big Brothers, Big Sisters here in South Texas.
Organization, yeah.
Great organization, certainly close to my heart. I've done a lot of youth work since.
I love it.
But working with them in-house at a nonprofit, you get to learn and see so much, and as well as understanding that, everyone's job is recruitment, right? And everyone's job is development and fundraising. Mm-hmm. And so you can't really just do one part of marketing. And I really
like being a business owner, right?
Absolutely. You have to do it all, and you really should learn how to do it all well, or at least get team members who can support you. Mm-hmm. So, and actually, Ann, that you bring that up, I often when I teach around digital marketing or social media use, I often will talk to nonprofits and compare them to small businesses and say, this is what works for a small business owner, and this should work then for nonprofit, because you have about the same budgets, right?
Yes, yeah. Well, and the fundamentals are the fundamentals. And a lot of people don't realize that. I hear a lot. Well, have you ever worked with such and such a business? Look, business is business, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's some parts that you want to tailor for and understand. Sure. Right. But for the most part, and that's what a lot of people are forgetting, particularly this year, when it's like we're in a pandemic, and in some ways it feels like in pandemonium too. Right. That right. The fundamentals really matter, and those tried and true, telling the truth, doing the right thing, being accountable, showing up on time, coming off professionally. Those matter today probably even more than they did last year.
I actually want to elaborate on that a little bit because, oh my goodness, the stories I could tell you, but 87% of businesses fail within, 7 or 8 years, and 97% within 10 years. And often they fail because they don't run good businesses. That's just the reality. I think about a lot of people that I've hired in business, and I think, how can you still be in business? You don't show up. You're not dependable. It's just crazy to me. But then when you see that, you understand why so many fail. And I think that we're seeing, I know that definitely the pandemic has hurt a lot of people, but if the fundamentals aren't there, they have no chance of survival. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I really and truly found myself talking about this quite a bit, and with a lot of college classes now, because of Zoom and our embracing of virtual presentations. I've really talked to campuses across the US this year. And so much of what I tell a college students is what I would tell any business owners. It does come back to those, tried and true. Are you trustworthy?
Yes.
Right. My entire business is built on trust. And I learned a long time ago, it doesn't matter whether people, like me, right? It is, what is my reputation professionally? Am I someone who is trustworthy? Do I, perform the way I say I perform? Is there evidence that shows I know what I'm talking about, right? That's why I do things like go after awards and write articles and do the research, is just to show that credibility so that I can be a little more trustworthy. But absolutely right. I've seen more issues management work and reputation management work that I've seen in many years professionally, just because I think of all the pressure we're under, and we're forgetting some of the simple things of just how to, do the right thing sometimes.
Oh, I love that you're talking about this because, being online a lot, I see just so much. And I even shared with you, I think before we started recording, that, I was given so much bad advice when I came into the consulting and coaching space. And, I built multiple businesses, but then there's just so much advice out there that just isn't really serving people and helping people. And it really is all around just making money and not really caring if they're really making a difference or not. And that's just been a really hard thing for me to watch and to swallow. And, one of the reasons why I wrote my #1 best-selling book that just came out recently is for exactly that reason. I even share stories in there of the lack of integrity and things that happened, when I was coming into the industry. So we see that a lot in the online space, especially, I think.
Absolutely. There's one presentation that I made just for this year, and I've started talking a lot about PR principles. And, and principles aren't very sexy. Right.
Right.
They don't.
Business fundamentals are not either. So yes, right.
Absolutely. They don't go viral. Right. A lot of times, to be very forthcoming, what goes viral are things that are pretty deviant, in our industry, are things that, make news for other reasons too, because it's like watching, something very unfortunate happening. It just catches people's attention, but not for the right reasons.
Right.
And so when you juxtapose PR principles, which, there's core principles that are almost 100 years old that one of the founding fathers of PR, Arthur Page, wrote, and they're very simple. Like I said before, telling the truth, right? Taking action matters more than words, things like that. Managing for tomorrow, which which means looking ahead and understanding that a business owner, or if you're in PR, that's a long game.
Right.
Relationships are everything in all the industries, but for sure around being a business owner and being able to sell your organization, your service or product.
Absolutely.
If your product's no good, if your program's no good, your service is no good, if you don't perform well, as a coach, it doesn't matter how slick the marketing is or how great the visuals are.
Right. It's going to catch up with you. Although I do see that people make a lot of money before it does catch up with them.
Right.
Which is, it's kind of crazy to see that, but that's true.
And they can get sued for a whole lot more money too, Anne. And
that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
But, I think to your point, when you really do have the principles and the fundamentals dialed in, and like you said, they're not the sexiest thing. They're not the thing that everyone wants to talk about, but without it, people don't survive, people don't thrive, and they don't really reach their full potential in their business. And I think that's even sadder when they're not reaching their full potential just because they don't have these things in place.
No, absolutely. And I think it's very hard, especially if you are, I know that your audience has a lot of business owners, when so much of it relies on us as entrepreneurs, as business owners, sometimes even our personal lives, right? Not reaching the potential in our personal lives will trickle in to the confidence we have as a business owner, to the, perception or, in some cases, like reality, what people see about you and how you do show up, in your presence, in person, online, in all kinds of ways. So, those fundamentals are really important as a person, as a pro. If you're managing social media channels, if you're managing, marketing, advertising, as a business owner, the ideas of checking the facts and making sure that, what you're sharing is accurate and truthful. Because like you mentioned, you can make a lot of money or you can make a big flash now, but we have a long life to live.
Right. It's not sustainable. No, absolutely. You're right. It catches up. It does.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah. And so coming from the nonprofit and being inside the nonprofit, really understanding how do you influence people to help? That is so huge to really understand. I think even if you have time to share with the nonprofit and understanding what drives people and incentivizes them to give and to help. And even if they're not doing all that well, it can be very eye-opening in terms of, being great at business. So that opportunity was fantastic, and went from there to a corporate opportunity. And so more your for-profit or private sector at a huge, greatly known and beloved grocery retail company called H-E-B. Only in Texas, very, very Texas-based, but they do a fantastic job in terms of tailoring all their storefronts, their programs, how they even work with employees. We called ourselves partners as employees. When I was there was about 90,000 employees.
Wow.
And so I quickly learned how to do, not only PR, some more of the external communication, but at H-E-B, I worked in diversity and inclusion and the corporate giving for historically disenfranchised groups. And that included not only like the ethnic groups we might think of, but also women, people with disabilities, LGBTQIA, and being even more fine-tuned and sensitive to how we speak, what our nonverbals say, and how that is could be interpreted by others was really helpful to me. And I was in that role for about 5 years, as well as the giving to those groups and volunteer organization, organizing and gathering volunteers and from inside the company and their families and friends, and really learned a lot. Again, a lot of dotted line experiences I've had, but that means you have to lead with influence. And I think a lot of small business owners are in that space too, where you may not have a lot of employees, right? Or maybe they're contractors.
Right.
If you're doing coaching too, even if you have those who are being coached by you, like really you can't make them do anything.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. You do have to influence people.
So learning how to really, build that relationship to influence them is helpful. And then I went from there to doing more internal communication and really boiling down one message for a lot of different types of employees, from, the admin office and corporate offices to, the grocery store workers. And then how did that message need to come across to those who drove the trucks and did the manufacturing of products there, and a lot of health and wellness work too. And from HEB, I went to a large agency, the largest in San Antonio, I believe, at least at the time, KGB, Texas, and was there for about 2 years. And at that time, I saw a lot of more independent or solopreneur, pros come in and out and work and collaborate with us. And so I learned so much and was really inspired by them to learn more about, well, how do you be your own, how could I be my own business owner? And what is that lifestyle like? And what are the risks I would have to take? And how can I do that as low risk as possible? I'm a Dave Ramsey alum. I'm a Dave Ramsey fan and alum. And so we got out of debt years ago, except for our house. And that was a huge feat. That was over $80,000 that my husband and I tackled. And so I didn't want to put that back on it as a business owner. And so that was something that I really had to think about. And how could I run a cash-based business? And so this has been a great fit. About 2 years into that, I saw the writing on the wall of my kids were both downtown. I have a 6-year-old son. He's 6 now, but he was a little baby, not even 1 at the time. And my daughter was finishing up kindergarten. They're both at a private school downtown, because in San Antonio, we are very spread out. I mean,
right. And I think we had that conversation. Texas is very spread out. You can't go anywhere without having to drive 30 minutes or 40 minutes, right?
Absolutely. And in San Antonio, very spread out, definitely need a car. I love the home I'm in. I love, the area I'm in, but it wasn't anywhere near downtown, which seemed to be the place where all the PR and marketing jobs were,
right?
At least for me. So it was, sometimes getting beaten by that commute. And as we continue to grow here, that was more challenging. And in public relations, you never know when a journalist may call, or there may be a crisis that happens, or, a big, really important client meeting. And I could just see I was either going to become a wonderful, consultant or contractor, or a terrible employee, just based on, my having to leave at a certain time to get my kids from school and get to my side of town and make all the times you need to as far as parent pickup. So
a lot of women get started, though. I mean, that's how I started in my first business too. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. We struggled financially, and I started looking for a way to make money to help out my family. And, that turned into a global business that I did for years, and till my next and my next and my next. And but I think a lot of women get started like that. They find out, being in corporate or being under someone else's thumb and, calling all the shots, and my family has to come first to me. And so they make that decision to go out on their own. I'd like to talk about that for just a minute, because as you went out on your own and you took that leap, which I highly recommend. I can't imagine. I think I'm unemployable at this point in my life for sure. But as you took that leap, how did you get your first clients? I know that this is always something people ask. And did you leverage a lot of the relationships that you already had built up in the, through previous clients, or, through the companies you'd worked with, or how'd you do that?
Yeah, that's a very important question, I think, for a lot of people. So it all goes down to relationships and network, right? And so for me, I have been very, very involved. I always made sure that I had a diverse portfolio of colleagues. And what I mean by that is I didn't only just, put everything on or, rely on those who I immediately worked with, to support me professionally, right? As mentors and as, those who could refer me to the next job or a great project or a great, board member opportunity. For me, the Public Relations Society of America, has been such a growth opportunity in my career. When I started in PR, I had just heard about the industry, like my last semester in college. I hadn't taken a real applied course on public relations, but it sounded like it was a good idea and a good job for me when I heard another student present on it. Mm-hmm. I was supposed to be a veterinarian when I, in my mind.
Quite a difference. I don't know. Is it different?
When I started school, I thought I'll be a veterinarian. I love animals. Well, how young is that, right? Mm-hmm. And, but as I went through school, I knew, okay, well, I was a creative writer. I was a published poet, published essayist, photographer.
Wow.
But I had thank you. Yeah, I had a big student loan coming. Mm-hmm. And neither of those, I didn't want to be a starving artist. And so I definitely, was trying to figure out how to make this all work. And so I presented my capstone on being a copywriter in advertising. And little did I know, I've done a ton of copywriting in my profession with more of that PR focus. But I had a friend in school present on it, and that sounded like a great thing. But all that to say is it was somebody that I knew at the gym when I was a college student and I was finishing up my degree, and said, I really want to start working at a PR firm, but there's no jobs. Back then we looked in the paper and there's no jobs, no ads for it. I really don't know anyone. He said, oh, my wife owns a firm. You should probably contact her, see if you can do a little writing for her. So it's always opportunities like that. They gave me my first opportunity. I went and sat in a college class as a college graduate to audit and learn more about the writing style for PR. And so I did a lot of things like that that showed a lot of grit and chutzpah and energy and wanting to learn. I was told by my first bosses at that initial Hispanic boutique PR firm, in-house public relations, those owners were very well connected. They said, you need to get involved in PRSA. You need to go to the professional journalists and the Hispanic Journalists Association meetings. You need to volunteer. So they taught me early on, you have to give a lot to get a lot back in the industry. And absolutely. So I started very young in my career doing that. And to this day, right before we got on, I was emailing the Hispanic Journalists Association about, some a book sale that they wanted, help and advice on, right? So I donate a whole lot of time to other pros, which really grows my network so organically and really exponentially. So that, people have this opportunity to work with me that they say, yeah, she's sharp, or she's really good, or, she comes through, or she's really well connected. And it's because of what I give in my time professionally that I get back a lot of referrals, and so for me, that first year of business was pretty unique too. I was at KGB Texas and I told them, my children are going to have to move schools from downtown back to my side of town. The writing on the wall for where they were at the school was that school financially was having some issues. And I wanted to get ahead of that because I manage for tomorrow. And as a PR pro, I can kind of forecast. I see patterns. I'm like, something's coming, right? So I could see that there was an issue there. And we loved our little private school downtown. And it was good that they were close to me because I was always running late to pick them up. But I could project, it was about summertime of 2015. I could project by fall they may not be doing well. So I wanted to move my children, get them emotionally ready before the new semester, right? The new school year. And so I told my boss at the time that, I have to work out of my home so I can make pickup and drop off times for them if they go to school by our house, which is, a suburb from downtown.
Right.
And said, let's talk about this. So I wrote a little business case of I can either, stay here as an employee and work remotely full time and come in for important meetings, or I can transition to a contractor. What would you like? There's no reason. I was not unhappy. And in fact, they were very good to me and still have been good to me and refer me sometimes. And we support each other. But I said, what would you be most comfortable with? I was a PR supervisor at the time. And, 5 years ago, working remotely while everyone was in an office wasn't as traditional. And now with the pandemic, a silver lining is I think a lot more workplaces have had the opportunity to give it a try. And it doesn't work for everyone, but for me, it works out very well. I get into deep work and I'm not as interrupted.
Right.
So when you're doing hardcore planning or you're dealing with an issue, you can really think without, a lot of water cooler chat happening.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of unproductive time in a corporation or in a big company that, people don't realize. And so, no, it's interesting that worked out for you. We're so blessed to be able to have the technology that we have today. I actually went online several years ago because I was running around all of my clients' businesses and helping them. And I just thought, this is just not what I want my business to be. And, I hired someone to help me learn all of the online stuff. But it's so interesting through 2020 how we are seeing, I think we're just going to see the landscape of business change forever. I don't think it's ever going to be the same. I think corporations aren't going to open back up all those big buildings. And, they're realizing that they don't have to have all of those costs. They don't have to have people there, to get the job done. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next year or so.
Absolutely. I like the idea of really customizing, even per employee, what that environment is. Mm-hmm. One of the jobs that I had, it was I'm very extroverted. I'm also empathic, which means and it's great to be a PR pro with empathy because I can pick up a vibe like that in a room. I know exactly how people are feeling, and I can kind of add that into the ability to kind of see trends, at a strategic point of view and forecast what could be coming based on past experiences in history. It's a great combo for a client, but it's not always a great combo for me in terms of my stress, because if I'm in a high traffic area and I hear a lot of people talking, I'm picking up, my antenna goes up, and I'm so instead of working, right, I'm listening a little bit. And, I remember one desk, even the way it was, I'm in an L shape now, which I really like to spread out, but I was in a little corner cube and people would walk behind me to get to the printer. And so all day I was
right.
stimulated. It was too stimulating for me. So sometimes even that environment matters, or, I've seen where remote work works really well for, just cutting out the commute. And I literally have more time to work and jump into something, and people don't know, am I polished Melissa or am I Melissa in slippers? All that matters is my brain. And I love cutting out some of the superficial in our world sometimes, right?
Yes.
We get down to substance sometimes. And if we're strategic with what tool, we shouldn't Zoom for everything. And in fact, during the pandemic, when it first started, I had to give out a lot of tips on how do you interview with Zoom? When should you use it? When should you not use it, right? When is it just adding more pressure to people's lives? Or, not everyone has an office, right? I had a home office and I was resilient because I was working from my home office for the last 5 years, but not everyone's in that situation. We had to make different accommodations when my son in the spring and my daughter were home schooling, right? Virtual schooling. And that was very, very tough.
I do think it's relaxed people a bit, though. I mean, probably every CEO now in the country, or probably the world, has now, worn his pajama bottoms with his suit. But I know it's interesting because I do think that people seem to be more relaxed. I know even recording this podcast, sometimes I'm wondering about the backgrounds that they have on their podcasts, and I'm thinking, well, they don't seem to care. And it makes you wonder, does anyone else really care either?
They do. And that's why I think that I have been having a very busy year in some ways. Part of it is just because seeing what was happening, I just went into, I doubled down on supporting my clients. One of my clients is Meals on Wheels. And, in San Antonio, they have really, really held fast to their mission and saying that despite this pandemic, we're going to continue a regular delivery model. A lot of this Meals on Wheels chapters, throughout the country could not do that. And we helped support them, and we found a way to do that. And so really reimagining all parts of operations, logistics, how you deliver, how you speak to the clients, what does even the interview process look like for them? And how do you work when all the volunteers that come from corporate offices are not at their corporate offices anymore? Huge pivot. And, all that to say is they really were just a great example of how do you take some of the situations and challenges we've had, and move as quickly as you can to be as fluid as what's happening in our society and globally. And for me, I mean, that was like, we were having daily calls, there was texts all day, at night, however I was there. Mm-hmm. And I also learned that when my children were busy, I would just knock it out. And then when they needed me and I needed to come in and help as principal, when my husband was trying to teach them and it wasn't going well, or when they got the opportunity to go back in person, that's when I'm just trying to be as productive as possible, because we don't know when, I could get sick, my family could get sick, my children could get sick, or the schools could be closed again. And so, it's been an interesting dynamic of trying to imagine what's coming around the corner, but then also being present and going, what can I do that's going to be the most helpful to my business?
Right.
Because every day has been a little different.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. And I do think that we've seen that across all types of businesses, the shifts that they've had to make, the pivots that they've had to make. And I think the people that haven't done that well are the ones that haven't survived, or they're the ones that are struggling. I think about, I was on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and there was a business owner on there, and she said, I just want my business back. And I said, well, and she told me what it was. And I said, well, what are you doing? You can't just sit here and wait. Like, what are you doing to start changing the game? Because you may not get it back the way it was. And you can't just sit here and wait. And I do see that that's happened a lot. And that's just such a passive way to, be a business owner or an entrepreneur that isn't going to serve people.
For things to go back to the way they used to be is certainly, unfortunately, a losing proposition. Mm-hmm. Everything has changed. Our paradigm has shifted permanently. I don't think
absolutely has.
We'll ever culturally feel as, confused when we see someone wearing a mask in the future, mm-hmm. as maybe we did as Americans before, right? It wasn't part of our norm that much. Right. Things like, thinking through spaces and indoor and outdoor. So I have a restaurant client that is building a new property, new development in 2021. And that client is being so smart because she's thinking through, well, how is, my community going to interpret the dining experience now? Mm-hmm. What should the spaces look like? We should have a lot more outdoor spaces, a lot more moving tables that we can spread apart or move around depending on when this vaccine will come out and how people will feel now, mm-hmm. Indoors eating or outdoors eating. And, so that's moving along with, I think, how, our public sentiment changes over time. And, right. And when we've all had something happen that in some ways is quite traumatic to us, we have to, as business owners, meet our customers exactly where they are.
Right.
And I read an article just this morning talking about that some of the best, surviving, or I guess financially in some ways thriving businesses are really acting more like startups. Mm-hmm. And when you start up a company, right, you're very open to changing the model a little bit and realizing that your customers are appreciating this product now, or they no longer need this item, they need this service.
Yes.
And
that is a really great point too, because the companies, look, business always evolves. I've been doing this 29 years, multiple businesses, worked with hundreds of business owners. And I will tell you, the ones that can evolve, the ones that can change, the ones that can really make shifts and really embrace things that are changing in the market and business not the same, like it always was. Those are the ones that, are around for the long game, as you said it. They're the sustainable ones that survive for years and years and years and have a legacy.
If you can really hone in on that as a business owner and keep that in mind, and listen to your customers and ask them for input, that I think it's going to, really pay off.
Absolutely.
Throughout.
Absolutely. Well, you have shared a lot. We've talked about a lot of really great things here today that we didn't plan for. Tell our listeners very quickly. We know that PR is so important. We know that they need to be seen, they need to be heard. I love that you've done so much with nonprofit. I always think when a business can give back and can partner with nonprofits or find their organizations that they're super passionate about. You and I have a little bit of the same passion. I think anything with kids is always my passion. A lot of organizations for kids is something that I love to give to. But I think when people can do that, it, number one, brings their value up in their community and in what they're doing. But how can they leverage all of that in the media, to build their business, to grow their business, to use it as a strategy, not taking advantage, but how can they apply that to use it as a strategy in their business to help them?
That's a great question. I actually have an article on my blog, on my website, mvw360.com, that really goes through what is newsworthy. And there's 8 basic criteria that journalists look for when they're trying to decide when to cover a story. Novelty is one of them, and helpfulness is another. So, excuse me. So when you're actually, when you're helping a nonprofit, when you're doing cause marketing, when there's a give back, when there's something that benefits the public. So if a business owner gets involved with their community, is doing something that is helpful, particularly to a lot of people, that tends to be seen as newsworthy. And when you are helping a nonprofit in a unique way, maybe something that's never been done before, that tends to draw a lot of attention too. So there's 8 basic criteria, and really understanding what is considered newsworthy would put you at a better advantage to knowing when to approach, the TV news desk, radio, and the right type of reporter about the story angle that you think they should be interested in.
Great information. And so what types of businesses do you typically work with? You work all over the country, not just in San Antonio?
I definitely want to work more out of Texas. I think that we got used to knowing our network, and we got used to kind of working with those we are around physically, and right, because of Zoom and technology. All this information and skill sets. There's no limits. It's transferable globally, right? What I understand about women, for example, that's a big area, a specialty of mine. So, that's transferable across the globe.
Right.
Why wouldn't that be? So that is on my focus for 2021, is really how do I expand more out of market so that I can work with more people who want to do good. I tend to work with a lot of businesses on the for-profit side that they want to do some type of social good. They want to help other people, or they have something that's of benefit that'll really help. And I have one client, for example, private sector, right? But they have a patent and a relationship around UVC lights. That if we get them in more commercial spaces, we can actually clean the areas from viruses, including COVID-19, in a very safe way. And so I'm so excited to get started on a project like that, for example. But a lot of nonprofits, I work with a lot of youth serving organizations and education entities, and that's from K through higher ed. And again, really focusing on what are fundamental ways that our community has a chance to kind of equalize, past wrongs and better themselves. So education, right? The more educated that someone has, better off they do, financially, the more likely they are to volunteer, the more likely they are to do, healthy habits and live a healthy lifestyle, contribute, volunteer. It's all tied to education. If you do the research, it's pretty amazing. So things like that, I look for those root solvents and focus in on that. And anyone who wants consultation really on, their presence, or is this newsworthy, or, how do you work with media? Those relationship-based type skills, again, doesn't matter what market you're in, right? You can use those across the country. So I'm very open to ideas.
No, that's great. Great information. How can people get a hold of you, Melissa?
Absolutely. I think the one source, if you're looking for something easy, is start with my website, right?
Okay.
That landing home.
Mhm.
And there you can find all my social channels. So that's mvw360.com.
And we'll put the link also in the show notes. So
That'd be great.
Yeah.
We also have a Facebook, but like you said, Anne, I probably rock it more on LinkedIn because I'm talking about, a lot of professional things.
That's right. And, right now with everyone trying to, professionals are really trying to build their brands, in a much bigger way. I think it's with social media and with the platforms that we have available now, we're seeing more of that. People, trying to build their online presence and their online brands and things like that. And so, where was I going with it?
Well, and what we talked about earlier, Anne, to that point is you don't have to be everywhere. And I always tell a client, number one, I always start with be thoughtful.
Yes.
And a social media channel is, like a stage. So you have to be if you wouldn't say it on a mic, don't say it on social.
Becoming the stage. With the pandemic, it's actually becoming the stage. But,
literally. Yeah. And it's basically a broadcast channel, right?
Yes.
Live or something you tweet can be saved and screenshotted, and it lives longer than maybe your last job did. I mean, it's incredible what we see these days. And so always being very thoughtful about what you say, what you type, what you tweet, what you share, and even sometimes I've run into situations where a professional I had a lot of respect for liked something somewhere in the middle of the night on a Saturday night, and it popped up in my feed on a Sunday morning, and it was not appropriate.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think a lot of times, I know when I work with business owners too, I don't have to do this so much with the professionals and the entrepreneurs I work with, but I do see with business owners a lot of times they are not keeping their social media. I think about Facebook in particular because it's more of a social platform. It's not representing their company well. And I said, look, people are going to check you out in all places, and you're not in the same position that someone who's not representing your own business. It's going to affect your business, whether you think it is or not. People do business with people. And so if they don't like what they're seeing, oh gosh, that happens so often. I can't even tell you. They choose you as a company.
And this year I've seen even more of that, probably triple times, the amount. And one thing we said as a family is we will not fall apart this year. And part of that is managing your presence online and being very purposeful on what you do. One wrong word, or sometimes even taking the wrong way can kind of change the whole dynamic of, your trajectory. So being very thoughtful about it. And, we can assess, we do a lot of audits, and we start with that research. So I'm happy to help, an individual, small business, up to very large, corporate businesses I've done, and very comfortable with them all, because when you're talking about people, that should be thoughtful, and that should be thought of in terms of equity and how they treat that customer or the employee on the ground should be just as important as the C-suite person at the top, right?
It's interesting. When I think of PR, I always think from a more positive standpoint, be in the media, be seen, stand out. And you've kind of put you've actually shed this whole different light on it that I wasn't expecting about managing your reputation, and, really almost from the negative side, but in a good way, that people need to be aware of this. And it was just something that I hadn't really thought of or really expected to come out of this conversation. I told you that at the beginning. I said things come out of our organic conversation that we don't even really plan for. So I love that you talked about that, because that's so, so important. And right now, can people really afford for their business to be affected because they're making those silly mistakes, which is really kind of what they are? But if they don't realize, if they're not exposed to know that that they should be doing things in a different way, they end up in those situations. So, which helps your business, Melissa, but probably not quite what you want to be doing.
Right. Exactly. No, I am all about the proactive, happy
Right.
partnership type work.
Positive thing.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But my heart is really with others, and so I want to share that as much as I can this year, because I think that sometimes people are just going through so much they're not taking a moment to breathe.
Yes.
Step away from the phone, right? Consider the implications of that reaction. And so just trying to manage yourself as proactively as you can on purpose. It's okay, not to take a stand sometimes. It's okay to take a pause and do your research before you respond. It's okay to ask to let me think about that and I'll get back to you.
Right.
And
wow, great. Such great value. Great points. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being my guest today. It was such a pleasure to talk to you and have you share your expertise and your brilliance with everyone that will listen to the show. So thank you for being here.
It's my honor, and thank you all so much for including me and listening.
You're welcome. And make sure you reach out to Melissa if you have a need for PR, or heaven forbid, if you have made a mistake that needs some cleaning up, reach out to her. And again, we'll put all of her links and everything in the show notes. So until next time, everyone, if you need help in your business, make sure that you reach out to me if you need profitability, cash flow, marketing, sales help to really grow and scale your business. And if you need PR help, reach out to Melissa. So you all have an amazing day. Go rock your business and God bless you. Bye-bye.